This is a short video to try and explain the concept of specification grading and how it's applied to Chem 131 here at Jackson College. So in its most pure form, specification grading is defined as allowing students more control over their grades by bundling together concepts or assessments and then setting levels at which proficiency is judged. A lot of times pass-fail type grading is used for individual assignments or tests. We're going to use slightly hybrid version of this. A lot of the assessments are going to be pass-fail, but some assessments, mainly the kind of multiple choice type unit tests, are going to be considered percentile scores. So let's look at the assessments we have in the course. We have chapter pretest. Now these are graded solely by participation. What these are essentially surveys of topics. So before each chapter, and in some cases these might bundle together a couple of chapters if we're not looking at a lot in each individual chapter. It'll ask you questions pertaining to the topics in those chapters. You'll respond with your best guess before you've even studied the material, and you'll also give me a rating on how confident you are on that guess you just made. This gives me a kind of database to look at and say, okay, here are the concepts that everybody understands and knows they understand versus here are the concepts that either nobody understands and they know that, or people think they understand it, but they've got the wrong answer. Again, these are solely by participation. As long as they're done by the due date, you'll score a pass essentially for them, or proficient. Now we also have, after each chapter, and again in the later ones, some of these we bundle together, a kind of quiz. Now these are pass-fail quizzes. They're typically 10 to 15 questions. They're multiple choice. And you can take them as many times as you want, and we'll come back to that in a second before the due date. Unit summative part A, this would be what most people typically consider an exam. So there are 5 units of material. We have 4 unit summatives. We don't actually do a summative on the 5th unit because we don't cover it in a lot of detail. So this would be your classic type of JETNet exam. Multiple choice, true, false, matching, short answer type questions. They're all possible in this setup. This is going to be graded as a percentage that you get correct. There's a second part to the unit exams called the Part B summative. The Part B summative are the more rigorous problems. These are the story problems, essentially. The ones that require multiple steps to solve and integrate multiple concepts. These are going to be pass-fail. There's going to be 5 questions and you've got to get a certain number of them right to pass the Part B. Pre-lab. There's a set of questions that I give it to you at the beginning of the pre-lab or beginning of the laboratory so that you can get down either reference values, concepts, or some procedural thing that I want you to note in the laboratory. That's again going to be a pass-fail criteria. Laboratory reports. These are the reports you're going to finish with the data after the laboratory so that you're showing me that you've taken the data correctly, you've analyzed the data, and you've drawn conclusions from it. Pass-fail assessment there. The PACE assignments are short little quizzes. They're 5 question quizzes that are graded pass-fail, and they occur every other week in this section, such that you have 7 of them. One of the big reasons for the PACE assignments is to allow me to determine participation in the online setting. So when I go every week to report attendance, which we have to do for our online courses, one of the first things I'll look at is whether the PACE assignments are being done, and that's actually their goal, is to make sure you're participating and keeping up with where you need to be in the learning at that point. If I see a problem in the PACE assignments, I might go look at other assessments to determine whether you're participating or not, but this is definitely the first place I'm going to look. And then the final exam, which is a percentage grade. So what are the pass-fail criteria for the ones that we're grading pass-fail? Well, the chapter formative and the PACE assessments are 80% correct on the questions for pass. So if there were 5 questions, you would have to get 4 of them right. If there were 10 questions, you would have to get 8 of them right to be considered a pass or proficient. The pre-labs and lab reports both have detailed rubrics attached to them, and to pass them, you have to meet the criteria of the stated rubric. And then the unit summative part B, these are the more in-depth, more comprehension-based questions for the units. There are 5 questions on every part B. You have to get 3 of them completely correct out of the 5 to be considered proficient in that unit B, or to pass that unit B. Now, this is one of the things with pass-fail criteria. There's no partial credit, right? So if you get down to unit B and you throw spaghetti at the wall, hoping that some of it counts towards the problem you're doing, it's not going to work. You either get it or you don't. And that's kind of the trade-off with pass-fail. Now, I do put in some systems here to help you with your mastery. For example, the chapter formatives and the PACE assessments, the ones where you have to get 80% correct to be considered proficient, you can actually repeat these as many times as you need to get to that 80% correct prior to the due date. There are typically 2 to 3 times the number of possible questions in a chapter formative than you'll see, and every time it reshuffles them. So the second time you take it, you may not get the same questions as you did the first time. So it's not something that is easy to brute force your way through. That's not the point. The point is that you look at the ones you got wrong, then you go look at those concepts, because it'll tell you which ones you got wrong. It just won't tell you what the right answer is. So you look up those concepts, you get a little more understanding of those concepts, you take it again, hopefully you improve, keep recycling that until you get to the point where you've developed mastery. Again, they have to be completed prior to the due date. The pre-labs and lab reports. So the pre-labs and lab reports have a set rubric, and I'm looking that you meet all the criteria in this set rubric. So after the first evaluation, you're going to get one of 3 things. You're going to get proficient, meaning you met the rubric, everything's fine, it's a pass. Acceptable, meaning you met the rubric, but you had a couple of small, what I consider trivial errors, and here's what they are. That's also considered a pass. And the third one you'll get is revise and resubmit. And this is a 4-day window in which you can go back, look at the feedback I gave you, look at the points where I said you didn't meet the rubric qualifications, and fix it. And then after that 4-day window, I'll come back to a second evaluation. If you've corrected the problems, it becomes proficient. If you haven't done any revisions or you didn't correct the problems, it's a non-proficient. So this is to get you to look back over the work and improve on it. Now, mastery on summatives is a little different because these are, by definition, summative. They're supposed to test your knowledge. They're supposed to see how much of it you've integrated. However, we understand things are tricky whenever you're doing an exam. So for the part A's, which again, these are the multiple choice kind of traditional JETNET style test, both of those can be done, or all of those can be done twice before the due date. So you get 2 tries at it. Again, there are more questions in the question bank than you actually get, so you won't see the same questions on the second run. But again, just like with the formatives, you'll know which ones you got wrong, so you can go back, look at those concepts, and then hopefully learn it to do better the second time. In addition, one part A can be done for an additional 3rd try. So one of the 4 part A's you take during the semester, you can go back and say, all right, I want to do a 3rd try on that one. And you'll email me, I'll say, okay, I'll reset it. You'll have 24 hours to do the 3rd try on it. And it doesn't have to be right after you do it, right? So we might get to, all right, I've done all of the unit summatives, I've got my grades in, and unit 1, it's not my lowest grade, but it's the one I think I can improve the best. You go back and do unit 1 again. Now the part B's. Part B, one of them can be redone with an alternative set of questions. So you'll send me a request saying, hey, I didn't do well on unit 2's part B, but I think I understand it now. I'll send you a new set of 5 questions. You'll have 24 hours to turn them in, to do them and submit them to me. All right. So you do get a chance to kind of redeem yourself a little bit as you go through this. So how does all this work together for a grade? Well, about 5 or 6 times a semester, I think it's 5, once after each of the unit exams, then I do one right before the final, and then you get the final one right after the final. You'll get a grade matrix. This is what a grade matrix looks like. It has all the assessments in it, and then it has what the spec or the specification for each of the grades is for that assessment criteria. So 4 point, 3.5, 3 point, 2.5, 2 point, 1.5. I honestly don't do 0.5s or 1s because they honestly don't mean anything different than a 1.5. But I do separate a 1.5 from a 0 because a 0 does mean something different than a 1.5 in terms of financial aid. And as you can see, there are numbers in here. There are the possible at this time, and this would be at the end of the term for this particular one. Possibles at the time, and then how many count for each of the grades. So if you want to know what you had to get for a 4 point, you would go across this row. So you'd have to get a 1 in prep, and these are just the logistical little mini assignments I'm going to give you in the first few days to show me that you can use JetNet, that you can upload a PDF, that you've looked at the syllabus, stuff like that. And then over here, like say, there's 7 possible PACE assessments. To get a 4 point, you've got to get 6 out of the 7 as passes. Pre-test, you have to finish 5 of the 7 before the due date, so on and so forth as you go down through here. Note, there's a percentage in this one, right? And you'll also note the asterisk. The asterisk indicates that the person has taken their redo attempt on that assessment already. Because in Part B and Part A, you have that one redo attempt, so I need a way to denote it in the matrix that you've done it. So I will send you this matrix, and then I'll send you, during the term, I'll send you individualized feedback on where I think you're having problems, what I think you need to focus on, or might just say, hey, you're doing great, keep doing what you're doing. Now, what's important in specifications grading is you get the grade that corresponds to the lowest specification that you have, all right? So if we look across here, we'll note that both the pre-lab and the lab report are the lowest scores going up this. We only got 7 out of 12 proficient. So if we were to look at this student's grade, we would say that they have a 2.5, right? They get a 2.5 for the course because you're bounded by the lowest specification that you have. In this case, that would be the pre-lab and the lab report. This is one of the reasons why I switched to specifications grading, because it gets around students trying to manipulate the data, trying to do so well in the exams that they can blow off the laboratory, or doing so well in the laboratory that they never have to actually pass an exam. They just have to get close to passing an exam. And that doesn't really represent the true performance in the course. This way, everything has an equal weight. Everything is important in the course. And the thing you do the worst on is what binds your grade. So this student would get a 2.5, which is honestly a pretty generous grade, considering they barely cracked 50% on both the pre-labs and the lab reports. Now, again, I'm going to show you this throughout the term. You're going to get numerous ones of these as we go through, and we'll discuss them each time they come out. So don't think you got to dive into the deep end and understand exactly how things are working from the start. Now you'll notice that I said, hey, this student's going to get a 2.5, but there's no score in the final. So that brings to the point of, what's the final do to the score? Well, here's the deal on the final exam. The final is cumulative. It goes over the material of the entire course. That's not as ugly as it sounds in this course. Chemistry, by its very nature, is a cumulative discipline. When you're in Unit 3, you're using stuff from Unit 1 and Unit 2 still. So you can't ever not learn material in the course. It's going to be used later. So that's not as big a deal as it sounds. It's all multiple choice. So, you know, none of the big, ugly, nasty problems. It's all multiple choice. It's 60 questions in 60 minutes. One try at it. It's a, a one and done type test. So 60 questions, 60 minutes. Here's the deal. It cannot lower your overall grade. All right. So when I said that student before, they're going to get a 2.5. As long as they take the final, their grade will be no lower than a 2.5. Notice, you have to take the final. If you don't take the final, you fail the course. All right. End of discussion. However, if you score at or above the next grade level, I'll raise your grade 0.5. So let's look at our fictional student again. Now we've added the final exam. This person scored a 72% on the final exam. Cool. 72% on the final exam puts him at the grade above 2.5, a 3-point. So I would raise his grade or her grade to a 3-point. If they'd have scored a 69 on the final exam, they would have got a 2.5. If they scored a 12 on the final exam, they would have gotten a 2.5. If they scored 100 on the final exam, they'd still get a 3. It only goes up 0.5. But that's kind of the carrot versus the stick method of doing a final exam. I want you to do as well as you can because I want to see what you've learned, but at the same time, I don't want you to have the ability to screw yourself over. Now, I will note that I'm noticing right now that these numbers are from an older version. The numbers are slightly different in the final exam rubric for this semester, so pay attention to that when you get the first matrix out. But this is kind of a brief overview of specifications grading, and as I said, we'll go over it a number of times throughout the term. All right? I hope this helped you out, and I will see you in class.